As a business owner and an employer myself, one of the lasting appeals is my key people, my key executives that I have, pretty much everybody that works for me. If I lose somebody and they go, across the street to my competitor, like that's going to hurt. It's always better just to try to retain the people and give them something that is very valuable and also very beneficial for them.
This is mutually beneficial. And so you can see all of the things that the employer gets and all the things that the employee gets out of putting a plan like this together versus just writing a check every single year. Almost every company has some form of non-qualified deferred comp for their top people.
Welcome back to the Wealth Webinar, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we've got a very unique topic and an amazing guest, one that literally inspires me every time I hear him talk, and I always learn something. You see, the cool part about myself or anybody on my team is none of us will ever arrive. We will never hit that arrival syndrome because there's always something more to learn. And I can promise all of you, you're going to learn something today. But what is the topic? People were asking. The topic is very simple. We are solving business owners' problems with a very unique situation and strategy. All business owners have problems. And let me just frame up one of the things that has been a problem more so and more prevalent than ever since the pandemic: retaining good employees, retaining your key employees, retaining any employees. Think of the turnover. I mean, it is so hard to find people, but it's even harder to keep good people. But what if it didn't have to be? What if literally there was a unique way where you could retain and even attract key people for your organizations, or retract and attain whatever talent it is you're looking for, but do it with a lasting appeal? One thing a lot of businesses do, and I think they make a huge mistake at doing this, is they think all their key people and they think new employees are motivated solely by money. So a lot of times what they do is they'll throw out bonuses. Hey, we'll give you a sign-on bonus. Hey, we'll give you a bonus for this. Hey, we're going to give you quarterly bonuses. Hey, if you hit your productions, we're going to give you bonuses. Now, let me ask all of you one question. If you're a business owner, you probably already know the answer. Once you give them the bonus, what happens after? They leave, right? They got their bonus. They're gone for a better opportunity. You see, it's not the money that motivates people. And that's one of the most important things. But what if there was a very unique way? This isn't something new. This has been around forever, but a very unique way to make sure that your employees get what they want and they also want to stay because of it. Wouldn't that change things? Well, that's some of the topics we're going to hit, and then a whole bunch of other ones. But today's topics, just so I can reiterate what I mentioned earlier, is going to really hit home for all of you entrepreneurs and business owners. So real quick, let me just ask every single one of you, how many of you are business owners? Put I in the chat. How many of you are business owners? Put I in the chat. And then while we're at that and people are typing I, the second thing I want to know, how many of you are here for the very first time? We love our first timers. We love the folks that show up. If you're here for the very first time in the chat, put new, N-E-W, put new if you're here for the first time. Yeah, look at all these business owners. I mean, I kind of knew that. I mean, when we put this out, but we got Jody's new, Bernadine's new, Jet, Jerry. Oh, this is awesome. Micah, Connor, I'm missing some of you. Brandon, they're coming in fast. All right, listen, we're going to literally cover some very unique topics today, okay? So if you're brand new, if this goes over your head, that's okay. We'll bring it back, okay, and we'll answer your questions. So let's just set some ground rules or some, whatever you want to call it right now. So if any of you have questions as we go, just look down at the bottom of the Zoom. There's a Q&A. Please put your questions in the Q&A, because as we're going, we're going to be answering the Q&As. Listen, if you just got comments and little things, throw those in the chat, but Q&As, please put them over there. We want to make sure we answer every single person's questions. So I want to dive in and I want to introduce our speaker. So our speaker, I've known him for a long time, Mr. Clay Summers. One of the unique things about Clay is not only is he just a wealth of knowledge, but he's been doing this, folks, for 40 years. When I bring guests on, sometimes people are like, why should we listen to you? This guest, what have they done? 40 years. Do I need to even say any more? But anyway, folks, while we're getting ready to jump into this, let's put our hands together or put a big hurrah or yes or whatever you want to put in the chat for Mr. Clay Summers. Clay, welcome to the Wealth Webinar.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. 40 years sounds great, except all it does is make me sound old, I'm afraid. So other than that, my pleasure to be on your webinar.
Absolutely. So, listen, we're going to dive into this topic of solving, business owners' problems with a unique solution. So I know we got a lot to unpack here, but can we just start with what are some of the challenges business owners face day in and day out? Can you just hit some of those?
Well, I'm sure there are a billion things that the business owners face, but today we're going to target a few things I think that are really key challenges to businesses and business owners. And by the way, what we're talking about today will benefit any type of business entity. So if you're a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLC, sole proprietor, a partnership, really any business entity, this idea, this plan will work. However, it is targeted mostly to benefit the employee, right? Not the owner. We actually have some other ideas that can benefit the owner a little bit more directly. But I promise you this, there are absolutely some great side benefits to the business owner as well. But you said it best. The topic we have today is focused on rewarding and retaining key people. And you're exactly right. Since COVID, it's been very difficult to keep key people. One of the best ways, of course, is just to pay them more money. But the problem with that is as soon as they get the money, they're gone, right? They don't see that lasting appeal. They don't see that, hey, if I stick around, I'm going to continue to be rewarded. There's nothing in writing. There's nothing that's going to promise me that if I stay, that there's going to be great things happening here. And so the plans that we're going to talk about today absolutely do that. They give you that lasting appeal that makes your employee want to stay with you and then actually provide a whole bunch of little sub benefits for them as well.
I love that. And Clay, as the field VP of life sales over at One America, you've dealt with this a lot. You've dealt with lots of agents, lots of advisors that are working with business owners. So you got a front row seat to some of these challenges that not only the advisors, the agents, but the employers out there are facing. And you've probably seen it right within the company you work for. Like during the pandemic, I know for a fact there was a lot of turnover, there was a lot of challenges. But I know that the folks I worked with, at One America, all of them are still there. And there's got to be something to that. But it's not just, the other thing, too, I wanted to hit as we get into these solutions is when we talk about business owners, but this isn't just for the business owners also. This is for nonprofits, because one of the places I've seen these strategies used the most is in places like schools and hospitals and just nonprofits like churches, because those are also places where they really need to work hard to retain their key employees and also just all of their folks. Because think of a hospital. If somebody walks out of a hospital, that's a big problem. So these strategies don't just help all of you as business owners. If we have any nonprofits, do we have any nonprofits on here? If you're a nonprofit, put NP in the chat. Or if you work for a nonprofit, put NP in the chat, because this will really be interesting stuff for all of you as well. So let's dive in. Let's talk about some of these solutions to some of the common problems business owners have. And actually, can I just get the 800-pound gorilla off my back and tell everybody kind of one of the key machines we're going to use, one of the key things we're going to use for this? Because this is I just like getting it right out in the open. Is that okay?
Absolutely. We're going to be talking where you're going.
We're going to be talking about a vehicle. But hold on. Actually, before I tell you what the vehicle is that runs a lot of these strategies, can I just tell you some of the things it does? You heard me talk about in that video, you talk about guarantees. Like this vehicle, this thing that we're going to talk to you about, okay, has some guarantees. Number one, a guaranteed interest rate, and also a guaranteed death benefit the day you die. Okay, so that should hint some of you to what it is. If it's done properly, it can have very advantageous tax benefits for you. Okay, it provides some liquidity for you. It also provides protection for you. Does anyone know what this is? Put it in the chat if you know what this vehicle is that we're going to be talking about for these strategies. Does anyone know? Oh, actually, I'll give you the spoiler. It's something that most people don't like. It's something a lot of the gurus like Dave Ramsey don't. They tell you not to put your money in. Can anyone guess? Oh, no, Will, it couldn't be whole life, could it? Absolutely. You nailed it. See, as soon as I told people what it is, that it's something people don't like, they all got it. That's right. It's whole life and specially designed whole life. So now that I got the 800-pound gorilla off, now I think we can go into really solving some problems. Clay.
Great. So, the two plans we're talking about, the first one is called executive bonus. Sometimes it's referred to as Section 162 executive bonus. The other plan is what we call non-qualified deferred compensation. And they are similar, but they are very different. Where they're similar is that they're both are trying to encourage employee retention with a plan that has lasting appeal, right? The other thing is they are fully discriminatory. So you can pick and choose whomever you want in the plan, and you can decide to put more bonus towards one employee versus another employee. So a fully discriminatory plan, because both of these plans are non-qualified. In other words, the qualified rules for qualified plans do not apply. The second thing is they're unlimited and flexible. So if you want to, you can put in anything that's considered reasonable compensation. So anything up to that amount is available, and then very flexible. So, as a business goes down the road, if things come up, you can make some changes. There's some things we can build into the plan that gives you that flexibility. The other thing is, of course, tax advantages. And one of the biggest reasons we have a lot of tax advantages is, just as Chris mentioned, in this particular discussion, we're going to fund these plans with whole life insurance. And of course, whole life insurance brings in a whole set of tax advantages that I think just kind of perfectly dovetails with the plans themselves. And so you're going to find that of course, the contributions ultimately are going to be tax deductible to the employer, right? You're going to, with a whole life policy, if there's gain in the contract, that gain is going to build income tax deferred. And depending upon the plan, the employer or the employee may own that plan, which means the employer or the employee, again, depending on the plan, can actually access that money. And there are absolutely some tax advantageous ways to access that money while the policy is in force. And then finally, down the road, if you want to take loans against the contract, ultimately, the beneficiary of this, the employee, can use that money in retirement or use that money to borrow against for daily living type items, and all of that is on a tax-free basis, right? The only other thing I would say about these plans that both of them deliver is that they are mutually beneficial. And I think that's so key, because anytime you look at a bonus program, I think both parties, both the employer and the employee, need to both benefit, right? It doesn't work if just one party is the winner. And so both of these plans are what I would describe as mutually beneficial. Is that helpful, Chris? And in a minute, we can get into each plan a little more specifically, but that's where I find the similarities between the two plans.
I think it's got to be mutual. I mean, if it's one-sided, then the other side's going to definitely have cold feet about doing it. The other side's not going to want to do it or not see the value in it. And the one thing, I think you had mentioned it earlier, it's got to have lasting appeal. And I think that's a key word. No matter what side it is, it's got to have that lasting appeal. As a business owner and an employer myself, one of the lasting appeals is my key people, my key executives that I have. Pretty much everybody that works for me. If I lose somebody and they go, across the street to my competitor, that's going to hurt. Number one, yes, maybe they signed an NDA, but still, they're going to know how I built this. They're going to know what to do. So now all of a sudden, I just lost a very important piece of my business. Number one, I got to go out and replace that person, which is very hard, very costly, and very time consuming. But number two, I got to try to find the person that can match the person that I just lost. Now, it's always better just to try to retain the people and give them something that is very valuable and also very beneficial for them.
I agree. So let me walk you through the first plan, shall I? The executive bonus. And so maybe the best way to describe this is kind of give you an example. The whole idea here is that the employer wants to retain the employee, and they want to pay them a bonus, but they want to build that lasting appeal. So I'll give you a specific example. In this instance, the employer would buy whole life policy where the employee is the insured. But here's the key. The employee, in this case, will be the owner of the policy from the get-go. So let's say the employer says, you know what, this employee is so important to me. Maybe they're bringing in sales. Maybe they're just a key, administrator. Maybe they're just, a key executive. And it's so important to this business that I need you to stay for 10 years. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy you a 10-pay whole life policy. Now, I assume the people on this webinar are very savvy with whole life, but with whole life insurance, you can actually buy policies that are shorter or a limited pay type contract. So in just this particular example, let's say it's a 10-pay policy, which means the premiums would only be paid for 10 years. But of course, the key here is the employer is going to pay the premiums. The employer is going to pay the premiums on a policy the employee owns. So let's just step back from that. So compare and contrast that to just paying somebody a cash bonus, right? So, hey, key employee, I'm going to pay you a bonus. And here it is at the end of the year, and I'm going to pay this to you for 10 years. And you, as the employee, are going to go, yeah, but what, I don't have anything in writing. Where am I going to get that bonus? I can see the other employer over here is calling for me to come over there, and they're offering me more money. I just don't know that this is going to continue. I have no guarantee of that. So with this plan, if I were to buy a 10-pay life insurance policy on an employee, and I tell the employee, I'm going to pay these 10 premiums, the employee looks at that and they go, you know what? I can see that, right? That has lasting appeal to me. Why in the world would my employer buy me a 10-pay life insurance policy if they didn't have every intention of paying all 10 of those in premiums? Otherwise, they'd just give me a cash bonus. So see how it creates the idea in the employee's mind that I'm valued, and this employer is going to actually do this for 10 straight years, right? And so the other thing you have to think about is the employer in this situation is going to get a tax deduction every year. As soon as they pay the premium, the employee owns that money. It's in their policy. So the employer gets that tax deduction every year. Now, the employee is it'll be taxable to the employee every year as well. So employers have one of two ways to set this up. They can either just bonus the premium, and then the employee would have to pay the taxes on that. Or they can set up what we call a gross up plan. And then in that situation, they would pay the premium, plus they would provide an extra bonus to the employee, enough to cover the taxes that would be due on that premium that they've paid. And then that way there'd be nothing out of pocket for the employee. And I've seen these plans set up either way, single bonus or this gross up bonus. Either way, it's up to the employer how they want to set that up. Now, the other nice thing about this, and this is maybe one of the nicest things, it's extremely simple from an administrative standpoint, and it's very, very low cost to set up. In fact, I think there's only one document, and that's only a recommended document. So there's really nothing required here. It's very low cost, very simple to put together. Now, in a minute, I'm going to tell you about a different plan that's not quite as simple, but it has more teeth in it. So let's talk a little bit about teeth here. So this plan is so simple and low cost, but it doesn't have a ton of teeth to it. In other words, think about this. If I'm the employer and I'm paying a premium on a life policy that the employee owns that. So if and I want them to stick around for 10 years, but if the employee after a few years decides to leave, then they get to keep all the money that's in that policy because they own it. So that's the part that doesn't have a lot of teeth, but that's okay, because you didn't pay for a lot of teeth, right? There's no administration. There's very low cost. It's very, very easy to install. But there is one thing the employer could add if they wish, and they can add a cash value access restriction. And so again, this is optional. You don't have to do this, but if the employer wanted to, the one extra teeth they could put into the plan, if you will, is the employer could say, you know what, this is a 10-year plan, so we're going to restrict your access, the employee's access to the cash value for the first 10 years. And so even if you leave, you still can't access that money for up to 10 years. But then after 10 years, of course, you own the money, and eventually you'll be able to access it, and so on and so forth. So that's really the only teeth that the employer can add. And again, that's completely optional. So now, from an employee standpoint, you've got a ton of benefits, right? First of all, you're getting a bonus every year. You've got to love that, right? And then down the road, the key here, I think, is you're getting much more than just cash, right? you're getting a life insurance policy that gives you a tremendous amount of advantages. Number one, it's a life insurance policy, which means it has a death benefit attached to it. So if the employee were to die prematurely, for instance, then the death benefit is going to complete the bonus to the employee's heirs, just as if the employee had lived, and probably much more so than that. So that death benefit's always going to be there. The employee could just cash it in and take the cash. So if they want cash, just cash it in whenever you like, right? At least after the 10 years. But here's another big key, and this is something I think would be incredible. The employee now owns an asset, and Chris, you probably know this as well as anyone, that the cash value of which can be used to assist them in their living and their lifestyle, right? So down the road, the employee can borrow against the policy for expenses, like if you're buying a new car, you want to buy a new home, you want to send the kids to college. And then once the employee reaches retirement age, and as an option, they could actually have that policy pay almost all of that cash value out to them in a series of loans, and that would come out to them on an income tax-free basis. So the end result is, instead of just getting a cash bonus, what am I really getting? I'm getting the potential of having tax-free retirement income. And that, I think, is a tremendous motivating factor for an employee who's probably looking down the road anyway and thinking, what am I going to do when I retire?
Absolutely. So Clay, one of the things I did just as you were drawing or saying all that, I was just drawing it on the screen. So, you know, a lot of employers are paying bonuses to their folks, okay, whether it's performance bonus, just a year-end bonus, quarterly bonus. I mean, there's all sorts of different bonuses. And a lot of times they're just paying it direct to the employee, but there's really there's no stickiness to that. I mean, they get the bonus, they leave if they get a better opportunity. Here, if it's going into this policy and that bonus is funding a 10-pay, like you mentioned, it's just got a lot more stickiness and a lot more value, because now it's not just the cash value, it's also the death benefit. So they're making the premium deposits, the employer is getting the tax deduction, the employee is taxed on the bonus just like they always would be, but the employer could gross up and then cover the taxes on that bonus into the policy. But the one thing that I really did, and I took some time here and I drew a cool little picture. I don't know if you can see my gator head. So, you know, I put some teeth on them. So I put some big sharp teeth, cash value access restriction. So I think some employers, just to protect themselves, would want to restrict the amount of money that, if not all of it, some of that money, the cash value, so the employee doesn't just, again, kind of just take it as, you know, for granted and start blowing all the cash value and say, I didn't want it. But the reason I did this, and a question just came in that I want to make sure we answer, and I'm actually just going to put us all on gallery here so that we could kind of all answer it. So Will Smith said, suppose employer could set terms in the event of a breach in contract, like if they do, they owe your employer the annual premiums for years they worked or something. Is there, so we hit the teeth here with the cash value access. Is there any other teeth that you can put on something like this?
You know, that would be something separate from the plan, right? Because the plan is that I'm paying a life insurance premium for you. Once you've paid that, it's gone. Now, if you wanted to draw up some type of separate contract that says if you do this or that, you're going to owe me money, it wouldn't have anything actually to do with the plan, right? You just, you know, if you have a breach of contract or, you know, a breach of what I'm expecting, then you're going to owe me some money. And of course, they could use the money from the plan to help them pay for that. But I don't think it could be actually directly connected to the plan. Does that make sense?
Michael had an interesting one. Michael said, employee says, give me the cash now. In other words, give me the bonus now. I'll buy my own insurance. It will be my own asset. I'll be able to borrow against it earlier without waiting 10 years. So he's saying, I don't see as much benefit if I'm the employees, if I'm in the employee's shoes.
Absolutely. So here's the way that goes. The employer says, here's the deal. I'm going to buy you a 10-pay whole life policy or not. What would you like?
Wow. Well, when you put it that way, Clay, yeah, sure. Put the bonus in the policy, because if
there
it's
you
that
go.
or nothing,
I've never seen anyone refuse it.
Well said. Oh, I like that.
Clay, just kind of curious about even with the restrictions, if you have the cash value restrictions on that policy, let's say for a 5-year period or a 6-year period, what if the business actually has to let go of employees and it just happened to be that your positions we eliminated? What happens in that situation where there was a restriction, but it wasn't something due to the employer, to the employee's action and they're let go?
So you could write that into the restriction, or usually what would happen in that event is the employer would sign off on that essentially terminate that restriction, right?
Okay.
And the employer can do that at any time. So there's a lot of flexibility there.
So then at that point, the employee would then have full ownership and they could continue paying premiums, use the cash value, at that point, do whatever they want with it at that point. Okay.
True. Of course, the employee always owns the policy fully. It's just a matter whether they can access the cash value for a certain period of time. And
Sure.
Again, we see some plans with this, see some plans without it. If you really want teeth in a plan, that's what we're going to talk about next, the non-qualified deferred comp plan.
Yeah. So a lot of the questions are coming in. Peter, I love yours. I'm going to hit that in a second. A lot of the questions coming in we're going to cover those. We just hit the first one. I love this interaction. I love these questions. Does the employer or employee save on taxes if the employer creates the life contract? So I think we already hit that, David. So it's a tax deduction for the employer and it's taxed to the employee, just like a bonus, right? A bonus would be taxed to an employee. So it's taxed, but the employer, if they wanted to be really nice, could gross up the bonus to cover the additional taxes on the taxes that the bonus would create. Hopefully that answers that question. Let's see.
I almost think that might have some relevance to what Clay is going to talk about next in terms of who owns the policy, because there's some tax differences on who owns the policy, correct?
Yeah. And I just want to hit one more before we move, because this next section is my favorite. But this question Boyd said, so if the employee leaves within the limited pay period, are they able to take over the payment? So they already own the policy because the policy is in the employee's name, but they leave in 3 years. Can they take over and make the premium payments on the policy?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then, Boyd, I'll hit the second part. Are the employee limited pay plans specially designed for high early cash flow? They can be designed any way you want. So any way the employer wants to design it, which, clearly, obviously, that's what we do. So we would do it that way. All right. Great. I think we got them all. Peter, I'm going to answer your question. Will, let's just make sure. Will, I'm going to hit yours in a second. But let's move on to this next one, because this next one is a ton of fun to talk about and widely used out there. So Clay, I'll give you the floor and let you roll into this next section.
This one is a lot of fun and one of my favorites. It's roughly non-qualified deferred comp, but it also combines a few other things that we use. It combines key person insurance and a technique that we known as split dollar insurance. And so this is a little more complicated plan. Because it's a little more complicated, it's going to have more teeth. And it might be just a little bit more expensive to administer and maybe a little bit more cost, but it's not very expensive. And let me tell you, both of these types of plans, this plan and the previous one, we've seen an explosion of these in the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic, as people focus on trying to get back to doing business. So let me talk a little bit about non-qualified deferred comp. And so you can imagine it starts with non-qualified, which means it's not a qualified plan. So it's not subject to any of the rules that you would be associated with, like 401ks or actual pension plans, right? The key difference between this plan and the other plan we talked about is who owns the life policy. In this instance, the employer owns the life policy. The employee or the key person is still the insured, but the employer owns the contract. And let's use my previous example of the 10-year retention, right? And a 10-pay policy. We use that same example. In this instance, the employer says to the employee, here's the deal. I'm going to pay life insurance premiums on this policy, and I'm going to own it. And then 10 years from now, we want you to stick around. If in 10 years you're still with us, I'm going to transfer ownership of the policy from me to you. And at that time, that's when you'll get your bonus. And so now you're already seeing the teeth in this plan, right? So here's the deal. If I, the employee, stick around for 10 years, I'm going to get a huge bonus. But if I voluntarily terminate, I get nothing. The employer keeps the money and the employee gets nothing. Now you've got my attention, right? Now as an employee, I'm looking out there, and let's say you're putting, you can put anything you want into these. As an example, if I put $20,000 a year away, in 10 years, that's $200,000 of premium. there's a good chance that policy will be worth more than that. So at least a $200,000 bonus that would be payable to me in 10 years from now. And again, this is completely scalable. You could put $50,000 a year away, or $10,000 or $5,000. I've seen them very low. I've seen them very high. But this is a very motivational thing, I think, for an employee to stick around. Now let's talk a little bit about taxes. So there's no tax deduction for the employer until they transfer ownership of the policy. So in my example, the employer would not get a tax deduction for 10 years. So you think, oh, well, there goes that. But here's the key. The employer owns that policy. And think about an employer that might own multiples of these policies. You might have 5 or 6 key people, right, at any one time. So the employer owns that asset. Now the employer, during this 10-year period of time for all of these policies, and they could be staggered, now has the ability to access the cash value for business reasons. So now if the employer needs to buy equipment or inventory or any other type of business expense, they can borrow against this non-qualified deferred comp pot of money, right? And then pay that back just like they would any other payment or any other loan. And now obviously would want to have that paid back by the end of the 10-year period for each of the non-qualified deferred comp time periods. But this gives the employer a tremendous advantage, right? And remember, since we're using whole life insurance, any gain in the policy would be growing income tax deferred to the employer. So you get the income tax deferral of growth, and then you get the ability to borrow against that, and you could even borrow gain, I suppose, out of the contract without having to pay taxes on it, pay it back, transfer the employee, get the tax deduction at that time. So it's a tremendous advantage. There's one other big thing that this can benefit the employer, and that is the death benefit. So now the employer could set the death benefit up to be split. We call this split dollar in the business. And so the whole idea is that I might, as the employer, split the death benefit so that if the employee were to die in the first 10 years, prematurely or unexpectedly, then there'd be enough death benefit that would pay to the employee's heirs to complete the bonus that he or she were going to get had they lived. So in my other example, if you're paying $20,000 into the plan at the end of 10 years, it'd be worth at least $200,000. So you could easily have $200,000 or $250,000 or whatever you want in death benefit paid to the employee's heirs. Now remember, that would be paid income tax free because it's a life insurance death benefit. But the key is, even if you die tomorrow, we're going to complete the entire bonus plan to your spouse or your heirs, even though you didn't live. But here's the other part of it. We're going to take the other portion of that death benefit and we're going to pay that to the employer. And that's going to serve as key person insurance. If this person is so key to the company, they're probably responsible for revenue or profit to the company, or they may be very difficult to replace very quickly and cause havoc. And so it's very important for employers to have key person insurance on their top people. And this would help them get over the hump of whatever kind of loss in revenue or loss in administration that they would incur if that employee were to pass. And so splitting that death benefit for those first 10 years completes the bonus and then provides key person insurance, right? Now, this is going to be a little bit more expensive to administer, and you're going to have a few more I's to dot and T's to cross, but trust me, this is not difficult. This is not like a qualified plan. It takes a little bit more than an executive bonus plan, but it's not that difficult. Now, from an employee standpoint, lots of benefits. Once again, the policy is owned by the employer until it's transferred. So once it's transferred, one challenge to the employee is you're getting a very large bonus all at one time. So, that could be challenging. That could even possibly push you into maybe a higher tax bracket that year. So the taxes could be substantial. So what we normally do is we usually design the life policy so that there's enough liquidity in the contract that the client could actually withdraw enough money to pay those taxes in that 10th year or whenever the plan is designed to pay out. Now, again, you can design this any way you want, but a lot of times that's a really nice peace of mind for the employee. Now, when the employee gets the policy, even though there's liquidity in it to pay the taxes, they're not required to do that. The employer could pay the taxes out of pocket. The employee could pay it out of pocket, or the employer at that time could do a gross up bonus and pay the taxes for them, or they could withdraw the money from the policy as we'd have planned. So there's a lot of options, and the employee would have those options at that time, right? The other thing the employee can do is once the policy is transferred to them, of course, they could just surrender it for the cash. So if the employee only wants cash, cash it is, just cash the policy in. Or they can keep it and have that policy all the way until their death, or they can actually use that money, borrow against it like we talked about, and ultimately, if they want, they could turn that into a tax-free retirement income stream. And of course, when I say tax-free retirement, that's currently free from tax. The loans would build up, and they would just have to prevent that from ever being taxable, they just have to die with the contract in force. That's why, Chris, I do encourage people, if you look at a plan like this, you may want to look at a whole life policy that has some type of an overloan protection on it that would guard against the loan being too expensive or whatever that would cause the contract to have to be surrendered or lapse. But in any event, think about the advantage here. You know, if I gave you a $20,000 bonus in cash for 10 years, over your life, over that first 10 years, it's $20,000. But if I gave you a policy like we've talked about, and Chris, someday you may want to run an illustration to show what the projections would be to taking like maximum retirement distributions, you know, in your retiree years. And generally you'll see that income stream that comes out will be very substantial. And so you compare that against just the cash versus a retirement income stream that has tax advantages to it. And I think you start to see the appeal that these plans look, because basically what the employer is doing for the employee is giving, if they want to select this option, is giving them a pension supplement, giving them a retirement supplement that has a lot of tax advantages to it. So again, you're probably starting to see how desirable this plan would be because it benefits. Remember I said mutual, this is mutually beneficial. And so you can see all of the things that the employer gets and all the things that the employee gets out of putting a plan like this together versus just writing a check every single year. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm so busy over here.
Yeah, there's lots of questions. There's some about the cost basis as well. So I think one of the questions was related to when the employer transfers that over to the employee. Of course, there's a taxable event there in that transfer, correct? So I think the question is, what is the cost basis going forward for the employee? So I would assume it still stays the same amount as it was before. Is that correct? As far as
the employee's cost basis would be whatever the cash value is at time of transfer, because that's what they're going to pay income taxes on.
Right.
And so once they pay the income taxes on that cash value, then you draw that line. That's their cost basis. And so then any gain from that point forward through the rest of their working years or into retirement or while they're taking retirement distribution, any gain that occurs after that point would be the amount that they could borrow out and not currently pay taxes on. Does that make sense?
Yep. So I think that answers Rhonda's question. There's a lot of them in the chat. So if you're not getting your question answered, let's go ahead and put them in the Q&A. It's just hard to filter through there. But
so Will was asking, and this could apply for both, Clay, but he was asking regarding taxes specifically, if he's the owner of the entity and he's also an employee, like I could say the same thing. I'm an owner of my companies, but I'm also an employee. I get a salary and a check from my company as an employee. Can the entity buy the owner a policy as an employee, and then the policy and entity take that same tax deduction? More so we were talking about on the bonus plan.
Well, first of all, let me just clear everything up. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney, so you can almost rely on nothing that I would say that relates to taxes.
Actually, Clay, can I do something? I'm going to pause you for one quick second. This is something we always have to do for our attorneys, and this is the perfect entry into this. Welcome to the disclosure, folks. I'm going to read this real quick. Any opinion expressed by me or my castmates is solely our own individual opinion and not investment or personal financial advice. This content is for informational purposes only, and this information should not be relied upon for investment or other financial decisions. Nothing contained herein is financial, legal, or tax advice. Chris Naugle, any castmates of PMC or or money school or BYOB or money multiplier, or its members, employees, or contractors may receive compensation for advertisements or marketing of third-party products. I don't even need to read that because we're not marketing any third-party products. But basically, we can't give financial, legal, or tax advice, simply put. There we go. Sorry.
So generally, it doesn't work well for employee owners of the company. It would probably work in a C corporation where you'd be like a minority stockholder or something along that line. Because then you're really more of an employee than you are an owner. And the two entities are two separate tax entities, right? So the C corp could deduct that and you would have it taxable. But if it's a pass-through entity, think about that. As an owner, you're just basically taking money out of one pocket and putting it in the other pocket, right? So instead of having it taxed maybe at that entity, it's being taxed at the other entity, and it's just you. So I don't think it would work really well for a pass-through for an owner. It's really more designed for the employee. That's probably the best answer I can give you on that.
Great. Greg, what other questions do we have? You were on a roll there.
I think, well, so Gabe was just kind of making a statement about his painting business. I think we've got most of them. There's one question about businesses in New York and how they could utilize the strategy. I don't think there's anything different in terms of the strategy. It's just which companies, offer life insurance policies in New York. So I don't, as far as Clay, is there any regulation that would prevent someone from doing an executive bonus or the non-qualified plans in New York?
I'm not aware of anything there. My company does not do business in New York, so
they're smart.
Have a lot of information there, and most of everything we've talked about today is pretty much at the federal level from a tax standpoint. Each state is different in a lot of different regard, so we really just can't talk to states. But I've never heard of anything where New York would prevent that type of plan whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting, it wasn't necessarily a question, but more of a statement from Mary, and she's just asking, so is this what the VPs of banks are doing? So I don't know if you want to comment on banks, large corporations.
Let me tell you, almost every company has some form of non-qualified deferred comp for their top people that I've run into. And now they're not always funded by life insurance. They don't have to be, but we've already talked about all the huge benefits that life insurance brings to a plan. But I will tell you that there's a lot of other things that you just don't think about. Chris, earlier you mentioned like non-for-profit. So I'll give you some examples. Almost every non-for-profit has some type of a non-qualified plan. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, well, there's just some tax reasons it works well. But one big reason is privacy. I'll give you some examples. So let's say you're the superintendent of a school system, right? And so unfortunately, or fortunately, superintendent salaries are public information. Everybody knows what their superintendent makes. And while we love our superintendent, boy, the town generally doesn't like to see their superintendent make a lot of money. Got no problem with them making, like what, 100, 120, 150. But boy, I sure wouldn't want to see my superintendent make 250, 300, right? I don't know. And I'm just throwing numbers out here. So here's what most superintendents have. They have their salary, which is public information, but then they also have a non-qualified deferred comp plan. And that is not public information because it's non-qualified. And they haven't vested in the money because the school system still owns the money. So they don't, it's not published as the superintendent's money. Now, when the superintendent finally leaves, they pay that as a bonus. And then they have to just, they have to disclose that. But nobody cares about bonuses. The town's going like, oh, well, I assumed he'd get a bonus when he leaves or whatever. That just doesn't ring as important to them. Plus, the lady or the guy who's the superintendent's already gone. They have to worry about it. They're not facing that public, scrutiny anymore because they're walking out the door. So privacy is a big key here on using non-qualified deferred comp plans because it doesn't have to appear in records. And so there's and superintendent is a great one because I think everybody relates to that. But even, nonprofits like the electric company, the gas company, some of these companies are nonprofit, right? And so those salaries would be, you could look those up. They're state employees or maybe not state, but they're employees that that, you could look up their salaries. So privacy is a big piece here as well.
One thing I'll point out, when I was a financial advisor, which I did that for 16 years, I can't even count how many clients I met with, when I'm doing my fact finding and asking, okay, what assets do you have? What are you doing for retirement? How many of them said, I have a deferred compensation plan. And even as an advisor, and I'll say probably more so in the early part of my term in my career, like when I saw that, I didn't know what the funding mechanism was of these deferred comps. And I remember I met with this one client, okay, worked for just a big manufacturing company, and he wrote down deferred comp. I'm like, oh, at this point, I'm like, I was an investment advisor, so I'm like, oh, what is it invested in? And he's like, no, I think it's just a life insurance policy. And I remember just being like, why would anyone use that? Because, remember back in those days, I was primarily just an investment guy. And, when I started learning about it, I'm like, of course it was a whole life policy. Of course it was a life insurance policy. But, I remember that moment meeting with him. And I even remember where he lived. He lived out, it was like way out in Medina. And when he said that, I'm just like, deferred comp funded by a life insurance policy. But like now it just comes full circle, and you just start kind of piecing all that stuff together, like in how you said that. Just about every one of these companies have deferred comps. I mean, folks, if you start talking to your friends and family, I bet you any money in a conversation, you'd say, hey, you got a deferred comp? Oh yeah, I got one of those. But do they even know that the primary funding vehicle is the vehicle that, all of our gurus out there love to tell you is the worst place you can put your money? So if it's the worst place to put your money, why is it the place that banks and all these companies are using to fund these things? I mean, it just connects the dots. It really starts to make sense once you start, putting it all together. And here's an interesting one. Boyd had a great question. He said, if I'm looking to move to a new company, how would one suggest bringing up this type of an idea as something the company could add to my compensation package if they don't already do it? Let me just take a stab at this, Clay. Just tell them, like, if you're moving to a new company and you're at that point where they don't yet have you, just say, hey, listen, I really, really would like to have this added to my comp program. And just tell them, like, this is how it is, draw out some pictures. You can copy my drawings here. You might not want to show the dragon, because I put this one really had teeth, so I put some big teeth on the dragon. Sorry, I'm just having some fun here, folks. But, just lay this out. I'm happy to, send you the screenshots of the board that I'm doing. But, just bring it up. And then, hey, listen, like, have the employer that you're talking to, have them do a call with us. Like, jump on a call with Craig, jump on a call with us, and we'll explain how this works to them. And then they can make that decision. I think that's my 2 cents on it.
Well, a great way to stir interest at the company that you're trying to have add this plan is let's include the CEO. So, you go in, you say, hey, I've worked for companies like this before, Mr. CEO, but all of these companies have non-qualified plans for their CEO and their top people. So why don't we go to the board, Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO, and ask the board to put this plan in so that you, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, will also be part of the plan. That's a great idea. Let's go.
So Clay, do you sometimes see these plans being put in place in lieu of matching on a 401k, or could that be a negotiating piece where I know the 401ks you have to do it across the board. Everyone has to be treated the same. So I'm just kind of curious if you've seen anything along those lines.
I don't know that if you had matching that you would drop it in favor of this, but here's something to consider. If you're talking about key people at a business, their qualified plans have limitations, right? They have non-discriminatory rules, and so the top earning people can only put in like up to the same percentages that the lower earning people put in on there. So a lot of the people who make a lot of money struggle to be able to put money away for their retirement because the qualified plan won't let them. They become like what sometimes we call a top hat plan. It becomes top heavy for the asset. The government doesn't want all the assets to be skewed towards just the top people. And so they have these non-discriminatory rules in that prevent, top people from having more money in the plan than others. And so you do run into situations where employees say, I can't get enough money into the plan for retirement. And that's when you say, you know what? instead of a qualified plan, how about a non-qualified retirement plan? And here we go.
So there was one question that I think we missed, just popped up in my mind. Somebody was asking, what if you can't get insured? What if you have health issues and you want to do an executive bonus, you can't get insured?
Remember, you don't have to fund these plans with life insurance. Now, if you do, there's a lot of tax advantages and there's a lot of other benefits. We talked about the death benefit. We talked about being able to take retirement income on a tax advantage basis, but you don't have to fund those with those. So a lot of times when we put plans together on this, if you have one or two people who are uninsurable, then we'll use some other funding vehicle for them, like an annuity or perhaps just a brokerage account. But here's something you can't ever forget. And Chris, you alluded to this. So one big reason an employer would want to use life insurance, whole life, for instance, as the funding vehicle, is think about the growth in the plan. So if I'm using something other than life insurance, and I'm holding that money for 10 years for you or for whomever, every year as that fund earns income, now the employer has to pay taxes on that income. And remember, I'm just holding this money for the employee. So now you got the employer having to pay your taxes until 10 years from now when I can all dump it off, right? Who wants to do that? So if I, as an employer, if I put the money into whole life, one of the unique financial instruments that an employer can own, a non-individual can own, and still get tax deferred growth. So now when the money's in the life policy, and if it's growing, if there's gain, the employer's not paying the taxes every year on the gain, right? It's tax deferred to the employer. And then of course, eventually they'll transfer the ownership. So that's one big benefit to using whole life or using permanent life insurance, is that tax deferred of the gain for the employer. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things too, now that we've kind of laid out these two different ideas, these two different concepts, like, can we just do a quick thing where we talk about, well, where would the executive bonus fit better than and where would the non-qualified deferred comp fit?
Well, I think we've described them both fairly well, and I think people get it. The executive bonus, the biggest thing I can say about that is just easy. I mean, you don't have to track things. You don't have to, there's really no, a lot of times there's a document that just kind of spells out what everybody understands. And that might have to be drawn up by an attorney, but it'd be one document. But after that, there's really nothing to it. There's no ongoing cost. It's just cheap. It's just very, very inexpensive. And so I think that's the primary motivating factor on an executive bonus plan. I think the other thing is, if you're the employee, well, who wouldn't want to rather own the policy from the get-go? Then I know the money's mine and I could borrow against it if I want to. So I think it's maybe the relationship between the employer and the employee would have a lot to do with it. The immediate tax deduction every year to the employer might have a little bit to do with it. And then the simple administration cost. From the non-qualified deferred comp, the benefits are much, much, much more substantial to both parties, especially the employer, right? Because you've got the teeth, you're controlling the money until the employee, until you transfer the ownership. But the big key is, if the employee doesn't complete the performance that you've asked, you owe them nothing. I mean, that's a big deal. And so, with that responsibility comes more administration, and there are some I's to dot, some T's to cross. And non-qualified deferred comp came under a little bit of scrutiny years ago after a company called Enron made some moves that the government decided they needed to kind of firm up the rules around how non-qualified deferred comp works. And so now we have a little bit more rules, we have a little bit more administration. It's going to cost a little bit, but it's nothing. It's not a very substantial amount. So it's just going to take some time. Every year there's some things to add to employees' W-2, and a few more documents that would have to be drafted. And occasionally, very rarely, we'll see somebody use a third-party administrator for those plans. But that is not required, and that's actually the exception to the rule. So anyway, I don't know if that helps you understand the difference between the two.
Yeah, it does. So where should we go from here? So we've laid out these two different strategies, and we've done it mostly outside of some pictures of some dragons and that, mostly just verbally. Like, is there anything we could kind of draw on the board or show?
Gosh, just a quick summary of the things. It's designed to reward and retain employees. The policy values, if you use life insurance, can be used advantageously by both the employer and the employee, especially depending on the plan you pick. The plans are fully discriminatory. They're essentially unlimited up to a reasonable amount. They're flexible, so you can build flexibility into it. Generally simple administration and low cost. Work for any type of business entity, C Corp, S Corp, pass-throughs. We've talked about that. And ultimately, I think the big difference is comparing a cash bonus and what that would be versus leveraging the cash value of a life insurance policy that could possibly provide you with tax-free income in retirement. And so, to me, there's a big difference between that and just, cash in hand and being able to walk and spend that money instantly versus providing for an employee's long-term security.
Yeah, and I guess I would almost add income protection to that as well. I mean, if we look at it from the business's perspective, the death benefit has some protection, and then the family of whoever is the beneficiary of that policy has some income protection if that person were to pass away, prior to the plan being fulfilled. So
I would say the other thing is this is very, very scalable. I have personally been a part of these plans where it provides millions of dollars for the key people. I have been certainly, part of plans that provide like $5,000 a year to, 10 employees, or to 3 or 4 employees. And the time period, I've seen them as short as 5 years. I've seen them as long as, 10, 20 years. It depends on the age. But I guess my point is this doesn't have to be huge, right? It does, it's easy to talk about millions or $20,000 or $30,000 a year, but I can promise you that I've seen this put in at very blue collar level employers, where they're taking care of still their key people at a very much smaller amount. And in those situations, an executive bonus plan works great because that employer is probably not in a position to put a lot of money, time, and effort into having a plan that they have to administer. So it's just the scalability of it, that this doesn't have to be large. It doesn't have to necessarily be small, but it certainly can be both.
I think that's an interesting approach as I'm thinking about what you're talking about is, an employee may be at a certain level and they're getting a bonus for that level, but as they stay with the company and grow, have you seen cases where the company then creates another plan for them where they have multiple bonus plans?
Yep. In fact, one of the ones we put in this year was a very small plan. I recall $5,000 a year, 5 years. And their intention was, at the end of 5 years, we'll do another one, at that time for you. And of course, they're always hiring people anyway. So, you have staggered, sets of them. And again, it's discriminatory. So I could bring in somebody who's in the exact same position as a different person and not do it for them, right? Or do it for them and not the other. So it's non-qualified. It means you can reward whom you want to reward.
This has got to be one of the few things out there that you can do for your employees that is non-discriminatory. I mean, I can't think of anything else. I mean, defined benefit plans, 401ks. I mean, can't discriminate in any of those. I mean, pretty much everything's got to be all or none. This has got to be one of the few.
Well, certainly qualified plans are, non-discriminatory. You have to include everybody. Since this is non-qualified, you can pick and choose.
Love that. So folks, everybody learned something new today? And the other thing too, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many people are going back to their employers now to ask for a executive bonus?
And also too, we didn't mention this, but I mean, a company could technically put both of these in place, right? You could do this for some and then this for others. You could have both of these plans layered in on each other, right?
Absolutely.
Love that. Love that. All right, Clay, anything else we should cover? I think we got all the questions, right? Whoop, Michael just popped one in. He said, because this is non-qualified, does the plan need to file a 5,500 tax return each year like the 401k plan would have to do?
Again, not a CPA, but my answer would be no.
Yeah, that's definitely a no. Anyone else have any further questions for Clay?
Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of thinking, Chris, there's a lot of people that seem to indicate they're going to go back to their employer and try to have this discussion. So if their employer has questions, what do they do? How do they get more information about this?
Yeah. We've
Yeah.
been putting the link right there in the chat for the last probably 15 minutes or so. So if any of you have any more information or want to just look at this, for your company, for your employees, or maybe just need some help kind of positioning one of these strategies for your new employer or soon to be new employer, we are more than happy to jump on a call. There's the link right there. It's mentors.beyourownbanker.com. Just click that, book a call. And Craig, where does that link go? Does that go to you?
That one's going to the round robin. So I'd say they could reach out to one of us also, specifically if they have questions about this. So.
Well, yeah, let me go one notch further on that. So folks, if any of you want us to speak to, your employer, your future employer, or you have a friend that wants us to, then don't click that link. What I'd like you to do, Craig, can I just give them your email? Would that be easiest?
Yeah, that's probably the easiest.
Okay. So if that's the case, then just get right there, send Craig an email, and then you guys can schedule a time to meet with the employer and kind of lay out some of these different strategies and the benefits and go from there. So that would be the way to do it. If it's any of you interested, you could also email Craig or just click the link and we can definitely help you out with putting one of these strategies in place. Yes, Jerry's asking, can I get a copy of this info? Absolutely. Matter of fact, this was all recorded. It will be edited and put up on my YouTube channel, which is at the Chris Naugle. So head over to YouTube and subscribe to that. But there's a little bell on there. Click the bell and subscribe. Like you just hit the bell. That's pretty much all you do. And what that'll do, it'll notify every time new videos go up. And then this video will go up and you can watch it, review it, and all of that stuff. Let's see.
Yeah,
What skyline is that behind Clay? That is Indianapolis, right?
It is. It's, first of all, I live in the Indianapolis area, and this is a picture of a building, a company I work there at One America. It's a skyline of downtown and home, the racing capital of the world. In fact, we just hosted the USA Swimming Olympic Trials, first time ever in an NFL stadium. That was a couple of weeks ago. It was just incredible. We were just renewed for the Big Ten football championships. In fact, it's media day here this week in Indianapolis for the Big Ten. And guess what? The Big Ten's now 18 teams, right? So Oregon rolls into town. All right. USC, UCLA, these teams, I mean, what? So we're excited about that.
That was pretty incredible how they made a swimming pool in the stadium.
Well, yeah, they actually built like 3 of them. You saw one of them, the racing pool. There were like 2 of them behind the screen for warm-ups and warm-downs, but that was a fun event.
Wow. All right, Craig. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on the Wealth webinar. We'll keep rolling until 2:30. You're welcome to stay on. If not, you're welcome to hop off. Up to you. But we definitely appreciate your time, your wisdom, and all the help that you give us over here at the Money Multiplier and BYOB. So we appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Clay.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be with you guys, as always.
All right. We'll see you. All right. So folks, you've heard us talk a lot about, individual uses, for the IBC concept. And now you're starting to see, we did another one, Craig and I, talking about different strategies for infinite banking concepts mixed with COLI or company-owned policies. And today we were really just focused on those 2 strategies, which are more about, the employees and how to retain and how to solve that business problem. But one thing that I've been getting a lot, and I wanted to make sure we kind of covered this in the last 20 minutes or so that we have left for the Wealth webinar is, just, you all know it, or if you're brand new, maybe you don't. It's called COLI. You guys probably hear us talk about BOLI if you've watched the videos, bank-owned life insurance. COLI just means company. Okay, that's all it means, company-owned life insurance. So there was a question that came in that I really kind of want to piggyback off of. And Craig, we can kind of just do this together because you're our advanced specialist here, at BYOB. And the question came in where somebody, was asking about whether if they're the owner of the company, but they're also the employee of the company, could they do this? So, that was kind of not really in the lane for Clay. So I wanted to just kind of go one step further because I do this. 2 things. Number one, like let's just take you, the business owner. And if it's okay, I'm just going to use me just because, I'm today going to be the business owner. So for that matter, I'm going to put a hat on. All right. So this is me. I own the company BYOB. Okay, and then over here, I've got lots of employees and executives that are part of the organization. So these different folks, they're compensated by commissions, by bonuses and everything else. But let's just focus on me first. So depending, and like you said, I thought that was a very important thing, and I thought it was really good, even though we can't give tax advice. If you're a pass-through entity like an LLC, it becomes difficult because obviously any profits at the end of the year are going to flow through. So you're not really getting a huge tax benefit in an LLC. But if you are a C Corp, so let's just assume this is a C Corp, now all of a sudden we can do some really fun things. But here's the thing about all of you as business owners, just like me, that's really important. If for some reason we pass away, do you know how expensive it will be to replace us? Like, think about your value. Think about your human life value as an entrepreneur. Like, what is your value? Forget about like your value to your family. We know that that's important, but what is your value to the enterprise that you created? Your enterprise, your company doesn't die with you. Your business continues on. The legacy must continue. So like if I were to die tomorrow, like I don't want this to stop. I don't want people to not know how to take back control of their money and how to be the own bank. I want that to continue on, but that's going to take replacing me, making sure that there's a way to replace me. I mean, like how many events I speak at, how many videos do I create so that there's a new YouTube video every single day? That's a monumental amount of work. So what is the value to what I do? Is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? Is it $10 million? I mean, like literally the value that the entrepreneur, so now I'm going to get rid of me, okay, and I'm going to get rid of my company, but the value to the entrepreneur for their company is huge. Now, let's add one other thing. Let's just say you got a partner, or let's even make it 2 partners, okay? So your business has 2 partners. So something happens to you. So actually, I'm going to add me back. It's just easier for me to talk in first person. So you add me back in. I pass away. Do my 2 partners want to become partners with my wife? Probably not. Okay. Do I want to be partners with their wives or significant others? Probably not. So what has to happen if I'm gone, and then let's just get rid of these dollars, I'm gone, and over here, I'm just going to kind of try to do Larissa, don't tell her, because this is probably not a good drawing of her, but we'll just kind of say, Larissa.
You were just drawing some really nice alligators. I'm sure you can do a better picture than that.
I can't. I'm just going quick here. All right, so we'll do polka dots on her dress here. There we go. Okay, there we go. We got it. So not to scale, wrong color hair. We're going black and white. So Larissa, do you think she wants to run BYOB? You think she wants to take time away from Vivi? Do you think she wants to make sure she's working as much as I do to do this? Or can she? No, you know what she's looking for? She would like a check. That's what she's looking for. She wants a check, and she wants these partners to buy out my share of the company because she trusts them. She thinks they can run the company. They can kind of carry on the legacy, but she doesn't want to be part of it. So if she's part of it, now she's got to have partners. So wouldn't it just be easier if when I died, there was just a big old death benefit that was paid to that company that then writes my wife and my family a big old check? Way easier, right? But that check is also big enough to make sure that my 2 partners can hire a bunch of people to make sure that they have the ability to do that. All the while, now all of that made sense, right? That was all important. Okay, so now let's just get rid of all this. Let's go one step further. I don't want to die today, okay? So I'm going to put myself back in. No one's dying, okay? So we're going to take away the legacy. Every single company that I've ever seen has reserves or has capital. So reserves and capital. I don't think I've ever seen a company. Matter of fact, I hear this all the time. Hey, my company's got 200,000 sitting in the bank. I was just at this event this past weekend and sitting next to a business owner. They got like a bunch of offices and a bunch of storefronts. And he said to me, he said that we're just talking literally while standing on a corner. He said, hey, I got a bunch of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars was his word, sitting in the bank. Is there something better I could be doing with this? So, immediately, as you all know, me, I'm like, nah, you're doing just fine. Just keep it in the traditional bank. That's what I said, right? I was just like, just keep it in the bank.
I don't think so.
I'm like, yeah, there's a way better place. Now, see, I knew this business owner and I knew his partner was his wife. So I knew his partner was his wife, and I knew for one thing, if he died, she's going to want some money. She's going to need some money. So not only that, so they got all this capital sitting here. He's partners with his wife. And the question was, is there a better place this could go? And and before I said, yes, there is, I said there might be. I said, so how fast you turn the capital over that you're talking about? Like, do you need it tomorrow? Do you need it next month? Do you need it this year for that? He's like, no, that's money that we use to open new locations, but we're not opening new locations right now until the economy comes back around. I said, okay, so that money is literally just rainy day money. So imagine now that extra capital, we basically create a policy, okay, one of those specially designed high, and we didn't say that in there, but of course, folks, if you know what we do, we're always designing high cash value policies. We're designing policies for the infinite banking concept. That's all we do. So we create a policy, okay, in the company's name. This business owner, sorry, not me, this person I'm talking about, is now the insured. The company, okay, down here, we'll just call it a C Corp, is the owner. And now all we did is we just moved that reserve capital, we'll call it $200,000, into this specially designed whole life. One time, we just moved it in there. Now on the balance sheet, because this is one thing that they asked, they said, well, what if we need to go take a loan out? I said, well, when you do a loan, don't they ask you for a personal financial statement? So we'll just put a financial statement, personal or business. So in this case, it would be a business financial statement, usually a balance sheet, because they want to see, what does your company have? Anyone ever pay attention to what they ask? First asset, how much cash at the bank do you have? Okay. Second question, cash value life insurance. Third, it might be like retirement accounts. First and second, cash value life insurance. Do you think the bank cares whether you have all your money in a whole life policy or in the bank? The only reason the bank would care is if it's their money sitting in the bank that's leaving to go to the whole life. And today, I don't even know if the bank cares about that. So all you did is replaced the money that was sitting in a bank, barely earning anything, with a whole life, which now provides a death benefit should something happen to you. That makes sure that your wife has, or his wife, which is his partner, or your business partner has money to run the company, or vice versa. That makes sure that the death benefit pays to the company to make sure that everything happens. Either way you structure it, the beneficiary could be your partner or direct to the company and let the company run it. All the while, this $200,000 that was moved is now earning an interest rate that is guaranteed, never to change. I want to preface that, because if it's in a bank, it might be earning an interest rate right now, but it isn't guaranteed not to change. So let's just call the interest rate. We'll use the company that Clay was with, 3.25% plus a dividend. So now you're talking between 5 and 6% that they're earning. Do you think the bank is paying them 5 to 6%? Oh, by the way, 5 to 6% tax-free? Absolutely not. Now, because they're a C Corp, which I indeed think that the people I'm talking about are a C Corp, the premiums that are paid into this company-owned policy, now those are an expense because the company owns them. Check with your CPA on this. But you see, now there's tax benefits twice. The growth is tax-free, and also now the premium deposits potentially, can't give tax advice, potentially are tax-free as well, or tax deductible, sorry, not tax-free, tax deductible. All the while the company has all this money, and then all the company does is figures out how much do you want to fund the policy. So let's just say, well, just to be safe, we want to do the minimum amount. Great. Can you do $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year? Oh, absolutely, no problem. We're doing way more than that. Great. Well, how much do you want to do? You can do any dollar amount you want. Any dollar amount you want. I'm just showing you like the minimum. $2,000 would probably be a month, would be about the minimum for a $200,000 dump in. So what problems did we solve here? We solved a lot of problems. We got a better return on lazy capital sitting there. We got some tax advantages there. We made sure that there's some severe protections that we're lacking in the company from a death benefit standpoint to make sure that the partner, in this case his wife or anyone else, now has money to run the company should something happen. All the while, what really changed? Just the place where the money sat. Other than that, nothing really changed.
Yeah,
like
and
this
Chris,
is how simple it can be.
I almost tend to look at this in kind of if you don't do this, these are the two big things to consider. One is, who are you going to be in business with? It could be your partner's wife, then maybe you don't want to be in business with that person. So that's the first thing to consider. But a bigger one that we've seen happen in the past, because we all get busy running a business and being so focused on the business, but we don't think about continuity plans or sustainability. A lot of times, unfortunately, the business collapses because you have to do a fire sale to buy out somebody else or to pay off the debt. So what if this business has a bunch of debts and the income gets reduced drastically? So I would say the two things that you're going to experience without thinking about this is you may be in partnership with somebody you don't want to be, and you may have to do a fire sale of your business. So it's worth it to think about and how would you implement, just something like what Chris is talking about. If I have cash sitting in the bank account, let's move it over to this structure. And now you've got those, those solutions in place that prevent you from the fire sale and prevent you from being in partnership with someone you don't want to be.
The thing we always say, folks, whether you've watched one of my videos or maybe you've watched all 1,200 plus videos, I say the same thing every single time. Some of you probably are like, does he ever say anything different? I say, what? In order to do this, you're changing one thing, where your money goes first. Second thing you're doing is adding a process, because here's what I didn't explain in that last scenario, Craig, is this example here where we changed all that. I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff over here. But now think of a company. What is a company doing all the time? Aren't they buying inventory, buying equipment? This particular company I was talking about with the 200,000, they have lots of trucks running around doing all sorts of things. So now that they've got this money sitting here, it was their cash usually did things. So what are they going to not do now? Well, now they're going to do the same thing. They need to buy a truck. Great. They go out and buy another delivery truck, okay? Because they're expanding their business. So now they buy this delivery truck. It costs $80,000. They take the $80,000 from the policy as a loan, okay? They buy the truck. Remember that loan's going to cost roughly around 5%, give or take, depending on the carrier, but they're still earning interest and dividends of between 5 and 6%. Okay, and that's gross. But then they say, okay, well, we were going to just normally have financed this or leased this truck, and the lease on that truck would have been $1,000. I'm just making numbers up. So then what they do is they say from their company, they take the $1,000 and they just pay it back to the company. They could literally set up another account. So they just set up a second bank account up here. Let's just call this their bank account. Just try to make this simple. This is the bank account. And they just pay the $1,000 back. Now, all they're doing is recycling the same damn dollars. But they're making in the middle of doing this. Some of you might say, well, that's dumb. It's the same dollars. Yeah, but now they're making a spread on the money. Normally, this $1,000 a month would have left their company forever. And they would have had a truck. Now they keep all that money. Like when you do this, don't say, oh, just because it's owned by the company, it's different than everything we teach. It's still the infinite banking concept. I just used the truck, but imagine if that's equipment. Imagine if that's inventory. I'll give an example, and I know this to be fact. Samsung, you all know Samsung. They use something very similar. They have policies on their executives, and they use the policies to buy inventory. And then instead of paying, they get really good terms. Let's just call it net 90. I don't know what it is. But what they do is they use the terms from their suppliers, and they use the policy to pay those bills off, and then they just recapture the money back around. They're constantly recycling and recapturing the money and making a spread on all of it every single time. That's what these companies do. You could be doing the same thing with your company. Yeah. The same thing, but it's the same message I keep giving. Sometimes I actually get bored of giving the message, the circle, but it's so simple that why change it? Why make it more complicated? Because there really is nothing more. It's so simple. It's a mindset problem. When your family members, your friends, your other business associates start questioning this, oh, that's the stupidest idea. It's just a mindset thing, because really you're doing nothing different. Most people are doing everything I just described from a bank. Maybe they're not doing this. Okay, but they're doing everything, but they're doing it from a bank. And every time they take money withdrawal from the bank, that's money that's not earning for their company ever again. And it can be changed. Just change damn well where the money goes, and then add all these different strategies we talked about. Because every one of these strategies solves a different problem that business owners have. And that's why, like we keep saying, just book a call with us. Just get on a call with us. Let's talk about your business. Let's talk about your strategy. Let's talk about what you're doing. Let's talk about what you don't like about this strategy. All of these things are exactly what you should be doing each and every decision you make in business. You should be looking at your options. Just don't assume that everything you're doing in business is the right thing. Don't assume that it's the most efficient thing. Don't assume that it's the best thing. Always try to find something better. Like, I could go on and on and on about the different things I do with the business. I mean, right now with our companies, we do have lots, we call it our war chest, okay? So instead of a reserve account, we do use a bank, okay, a bank account, but we call it our war chest. So the war chest is just money that we save for acquisitions of other companies. Maybe we buy an RIA down the line. Maybe we do a big marketing blitz for something. I mean, it can be used for whatever. That's why it's called the war chest. So what we do is we funnel the war chest in a very similar manner. But I'm constantly using money in the company to fund additional policies, to fund additional loans out to things, because we make loans from the company all the time. I mean, this is how you build the company and build the balance sheet without having to work any harder or sell any more products. You just get your money working for you. But it works a lot more efficiently if you use the policy, the specially designed policies, the way we teach, than it does from the way you've been doing it the whole time using bank accounts. Craig, anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, the only thing I was thinking about is you're talking about using the policy to buy equipment, to buy trucks, and we have a advanced training coming up, and we're going to dive pretty deep into how to use the policies, just like Nelson Nash taught. How do we use the policy to finance the things we need and want? Could be personal on the personal side, or it could be in the business, but we're going to dive, pretty deep into that whole concept.
I love that. And I love that Gabe just said, Nelson Nash said we should be in two businesses. Number one, the banking business. And number two, your income generating business. Of the two of the two different businesses you should be in, banking is the most important. Hands down, no questions asked. But the one thing that Nelson Nash didn't say is the one thing that most people don't know is the banking business. So it's time for you to learn, time for you to apply, and time for you to take back control of your money, folks. Craig, as we kind of wrap this up, anything you have to say in the final minute or so?
No, I just think we've covered a lot of ground today, and we've talked about employee benefits, as an employee, those deferred comp plans, executive bonuses. If there's any questions, and if you talk to your employer about that and they want to learn more, contact us. We, put my contact information in the chat again. But we've also got this advanced training coming up again. I think that would be, I don't know if you have the link available for that, Chris. I was looking for it, but if not, we can get that out to the group.
I do not.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things where there's a lot of options here. And if you book a call with us, we can kind of help you get that sorted out and find out what's the right plan for you.
Yeah. So folks, one thing he was saying, sorry, I was spelling his email wrong. We've got a 2-day advanced training coming up. It's going to be really fun. It's all IBC, all things, both days. So you'll get an email, and you'll also probably hear about us talking about it in every wealth webinar. Today, I just missed the boat because I was so excited about what Clay was going to do. I totally forgot to get the link, but the link is open. The registration is open. People are getting in on that, and we'll have a special offer. Actually, at Ask Me Anything Happy Hour this afternoon, we'll bring it up and we'll give you the link on that one. But with that being said, folks, thanks for joining us. We're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to make sure that your problems get solved. Thank you all for joining us for this edition of the Wealth Webinar, and we will see you this afternoon for the Ask Me Anything Happy Hour. That's at 4:30. Thanks for everything.
Thanks all.
All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. We're putting up tons of them, but I think if you like this one, you'll probably like that video as well. Not only that, I've got a book that I created, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, where we actually show you what the wealthy do in the game they play with money. I want you to have that for free. And if you want to know about all my new videos coming up, click that alert button. Actually, smash that alert button, and you'll be notified every time we put a new video. So we'll see you on the next episode.